apologies, everything's gonna look a little different now. I'm on a different phone because mine ran out of storage in the middle of filming. So I did try to film that again, and then it ran out of storage again, so I'm going to show you an update of what I've done here. I'm starting on a mountain, and I made an unintentional bird which tied into a point that is now lost in the void of my phone. So starting again on my questions here, new artists always tend to feel that their work is not worthy of recognition. It's not good enough. It's bad. It's messy. It's full of mistakes. And this is simply because they are so used to seeing professional art that has been commissioned to be perfect, to be that piece with no mistakes in it, to be that piece that has no flaws, to be that piece that is displayed somewhere for recognition, for being perfect. And as it should, that is how artists get paid. However, it also makes a point to young artists that mistakes in art are not real. Mistakes in art are always bad, which is just further socialization in the self-expression and creativity that is art. And so we cover up our mistakes with paint, and we try again to make it look better, which I think is horrible because it takes away all the creativity of paint. And if I can tie this back into the deaf community, in deaf art, I feel like the concept of mistakes is more, I suppose, lax in the deaf community and in art because, okay, maybe I shouldn't say lax, but more accepting and forgiving because their whole life is very strict, sort of trying to be socialized into what hearing people want. And so the self-expression of deaf art and the beauty of that is that mistakes are more natural, more okay, more, you don't have to be so strict and conform to the hearing laws of self-expression, creativity, and art, if that makes sense. So moving on to question 4 of chapter 3, I do want to point out the looking glass self, which I haven't actually gotten to in my painting because I am falling behind. So the looking glass self, in this tutorial, Steve mentions that reflections are only as high as what above them, or excuse me, reflections are only as low as what is above them is high. And I really liked that quote because it made me think of course, the looking glass self and how that is a reflection, and how everything that is you is reflected in this looking glass self through what other people see of you. And I really liked the point of it being reflected in the water, and how everything that you are is only as, what did I write? Is only at, there's only so much of it that you can pick apart, and the higher that mountain goes, the more there is to pick apart, the more there is to you, and the lower that reflection goes in your looking glass self as well, if that made any sense to anybody. I'll show you my visual in a minute if and when I finish this. Now, for question 4, they do ask about people I was exposed to in my youth and my childhood, who were people that I learned, I got paint in my hair, were different from me. And one key answer for that is disabled people. I would always learn, and also elderly people. I would always learn, hold the door for your grandma, don't hug your grandma too tight, she's getting old, which is like fair, I get that. But disabled people were always, I suppose, a mystery to me as a child, which is strange, because I now identify as disabled, especially, and which makes it even more strange to think about. But disabled people were always sort of a mystery to me. I never understood the broadness of disability until much later in my life. And I never understood that disability is not this strict sort of set of rules that everybody has to follow, and that everybody that isn't the same as me is disabled. And that was an interesting one for me. Ooh, snow is hard to paint. In which ways were they different? They functioned in society different than me, which I think was the main thing for a lot of people, or a lot of minority groups that I didn't quite identify with, or that I didn't understand, or was segregated from as a child. They functioned different in society. So if I ever met somebody in a wheelchair, it would be, whoa, that person can't use their legs. That's so different. That's so unusual. That's so, I think I would probably use the term weird back then. That's so strange or weird. And it was just different. That's the truth of it, is that it was just different. And the other truth of it is that I wasn't that far away from using a wheelchair myself a lot of times. And so that's a good example of that. How was I taught about that difference? Same. I was told quite often that everybody is the same, everybody is equal when I was younger, which I now know is not true. Everybody is very different, everybody is unique, and everybody has their own story to tell. And I do love that about humanity, I really do. But I was often told that everybody is the same, and by that I believe my parents usually meant that everybody deserves respect. Everybody deserves the treatment, or has the right to be treated like a human being, to be treated with respect. And whoa, that to me makes more sense than everybody is the same, because nobody is the same. And that's a good thing to know later in life, I suppose. Sorry, just going to move down to my next question. I don't believe I'm going to be able to finish this. Another thing about the looking glass self as well is what's reflected in the surface of the water, so the trees, the land that I haven't gotten to yet, is blurred. It's not as clear as the original picture, or the actual mountains, the actual trees that are there, the actual picture, I suppose. And that can also be reflected in the looking glass self by saying that you are never going to come across as clear to other people as you are to yourself. And you might be blurry to yourself as well, and that's totally fine, and that is normal. However, the complexity that is you is always going to come off as more unclear to other people than it does to yourself, if that makes any sense at all. Oh my goodness, this brush has so much paint on it. Whew. Now onto my next question. This is from chapter 4 now. So according to the authors, all people have prejudice, and all people act or discriminate based on their prejudices, which most definitely is true. Now, a good example of this is Steve Ross. This video was filmed in 1993, and during this video, Steve Ross says something that might surprise you all, is that I'm actually part Indian. I am a quarter Cherokee Indian, and I'm quite proud of that fact. Now, this line struck me as strange and intriguing in a number of different ways. One key one being the fact that he uses the word Indian and then says he's proud of his identity, when this video was filmed, again, it was 1993, and the term Indian had been, apparently, I wasn't around, so I Googled it, outdated for a number of years, close to 20 years at that point. And so the use of that word was strange to me and made me think maybe he has some internalized oppression about this and about the things he's learned about Indigenous peoples, perhaps. However, he does say that he's proud of it, so I'm not entirely sure what his motivation there was. Now, there's also prejudice based on who is a good artist and who is good at art in this field. And as I said before, I believe that that is a very large part of socialization. However, if we're looking into it from a lens of prejudice, then I believe all artists have prejudice based on what is accepted in the art community, what is seen as normal in the art community. So for abstract art, for example, may be seen as more of a joke to a lot of people because it's not picturesque, it's not perfect, it's not like a human portrait, it looks more messy, like it wouldn't take as much time or effort. And some of the time it doesn't. However, I've found, sorry, I'm just trying to get some of the white paint off of my brush by painting on my hand. I found that most of the time abstract art actually has almost more thought put into it than any realism, any art that follows the rules of realism would, which some artists may disagree with. I've never really self-identified as an artist, so I can't exactly say for sure. However, that's just what I've found. And so by having prejudice on who is a good artist, you may pass judgment based on who you think is good or who you think is bad at art. And how on earth did he do his trees? Okay. And I feel that this prejudice comes from a place of, I would assume, mostly internalized. However, a lot of the time I suppose it wouldn't just be internalized. There is a lot of prejudice based on art in the world. And now on to my last question, if I may. What is necessary in order to minimize the effects of our discriminatory actions based on our prejudices? So I would say, honestly, try to move into the headspace of, no, not everybody is the same, and no, not everybody is the same as you, especially, and that's okay. I read online the other day, if you want to stop being so judgmental unto yourself, that first you must stop being so judgmental unto other people. And so if you see somebody who has maybe really frizzy hair someday, and you think to yourself, wow, her hair is so unkempt, so messy, so crazy looking, it is horrible, think to yourself, oh, but I thought that same thing about myself this morning. So then try and reframe and think, oh, that girl maybe is in a huge rush and didn't have time to do her hair this morning. I hope she's doing all right. Or try and be more empathetic, I suppose. These are the worst trees I've ever made in my life. And yeah, just to tie that all back together, I did attempt my Bob Ross tutorial. I'm not getting all the way through it. It is a 25-minute video. However, here we are. It's not the best, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be. My definition of good art is, okay, definitely not that, but that is probably somebody's definition of good art. It's just not mine. So I can't really drive my point home with that. However, the point of doing that art wasn't to be perfect. It was to demonstrate the power of socialization through the paint, which I also don't know if I did. And so this complete painting is a result of that tutorial, and simply following that tutorial is being socialized to do art in the correct way. I would like to point out, it's not expressing my creative freedom through the paint, although Bob Ross and Steve Ross do encourage that in their videos. It's more choosing to express your art in the correct way, in the way that makes sense to the rest of society, in the way that makes them feel happy about your art. And I believe the point of art should be more to make you uncomfortable, to push those social boundaries and to push those societal expectations and the prejudice aside and say, no, this is my art, this is how I'm going to do it.